They should have said the poet. The poet. They should have said the poet. The poet.
Sending Poets.
This is Sending Poets, a podcast about ideas with the goal of understanding metaphorical truths within the beauty we find in the human experience. My name is John, with me is Bob and Tucker, and today we are continuing with part 5 of our discussion of the book and movie Contact and the brilliance of Carl Sagan. We'll see if this is the last one. If you were playing at home, 4.5 was the over-under, and so we're definitely over. Anyway, we'll see how far we get here. But yeah, Bob, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning, John. I'm just thinking about Techno Vikings.
Oh,
Doing
yes.
well. Doing well.
Very good. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Tucker, how's it going?
Good, man.
Good. All right. So we left off with Tucker had a really good idea for us to contemplate. If we were the passengers in the machine, like who would we see and what would the scene be? Does anyone want to go first?
Well, I mean, since I brought it up, I guess I'll go first.
Okay, right on.
I think for me, it probably would be my dad. It'll be 15 years, I think, this May, since he passed. And probably like a summer morning sitting on the deck at the cabin we used to own would be the scene. And just simpler times, simpler memories. Like, I think that would be the place for me.
Did you think about what things he might say, or did you kind of not go that deep into?
For me, I think what I would want would just be have a conversation about life since he's left,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he didn't get to see me actually, kind of grow up and find my way to a successful adulthood. I was still doing the band thing, still not making much money, still dating women I shouldn't have been dating. And yeah, I've grown a lot since then.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that. Brother from another mother. I mean, like I knew your dad. I had like, a few like really good conversations when definitely, remember getting in trouble when we were young.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I can definitely see that. That's very beautiful in my head, the way I see it. So awesome. Bob, what about you?
Definitely my wife. I'm going to go back to the concept here real quick, just to give you my framing. The aliens are scanning us without our consent or understanding or any participation, and somehow, some way, getting all of our life moments and compiling, a best case scenario. Who are we going to interact? In what avatar are we going to take to try to combine with this alien intelligence, which is us, without blowing our fucking mind apart? Okay. And so we've got a chance then to be unwilling, but like with Tucker's question now, what self-reflectively, what would this thing be? My wife and I have talked about so many big ideas and deep topics. I would think that the aliens would have no problem taking her as the avatar that would represent something very meaningful to me, and that I would have a deep level of context. Like, you couldn't fool me with a false representation of her. And their representation is obviously going to be so good, so powerful. It's going to be as if she's really there. That's the whole concept, right? These are super aliens, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be like a facsimile or like a close representation. It's going to be like that person is there. And so to build the biggest, to have the most data to build that, it would definitely be my wife. And it would definitely be a moment where the tension is between like falling for the mask or, realizing underneath the alien it's still the alien. Because they're going to be so smart. This is one of the weirdest things, by the way, is with humility, looking at the IQ differential between Ellie or the, ourselves as the astronaut and the aliens that are dealing with us. Like, think about that. Think about trying to make some sort of meaningful connection with something that's probably further apart than like a human and a dog. I would presume. I don't know what the scale would be to gauge this by, but I would assume their intellect would be on such a higher level that would be hard to even, how would you be able to do these things? Okay, anyway, I still think my wife would be the obvious choice for how the aliens would represent themselves to me.
Nice. And I want to dig into that some more too. But did you think about like what the scene would be?
Very spooky in that the beach scene is probably pretty close. So she and I were married on Hawaii. By the way, my wife's name is Stacy. Just, hey, Stacy. I don't want to keep saying my wife. My wife Stacy, she and I were married on the Big Island of Hawaii, and we honeymooned on one of the smaller islands of Hawaii. So it's kind of just like that, to be perfectly honest. It's spooky close from the movie. How that beautiful stereotypical palm trees and lagoons and stuff, but that kind of a beautiful thing, maybe mountain cliffs on the side or something like that.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. So for my answer, it's probably going to be the same as Bob's. I would probably see Stacy. Oh no, I'm just joking. No, actually, I after we stopped the last episode, I went up and talked to Kim about it, and it's hard for me to have a single answer, and so since we don't really have rules, I have multiple answers. You're just gonna have to deal with it. No, but I think actually one of my first things that came to mind, and it's. Like Bob, I like the way you're kind of framing it up of like the aliens are scanning, our brains and stuff. So, even though I didn't know Carl Sagan, I've talked and thought so many times about how much I would love to just know what he would think about the world now, So that was my first thought, was like, maybe Carl Sagan would just pop up and be like, hey, yeah, you've been curious about all this stuff. Here you go. Well, maybe that's just my self-serving kind of thing, and I kind of like wondered, like, there probably wouldn't be that, like, if this alien kind of technology really worked, like, who would it be? And it actually is funny. I really think where I settled is right in between what Tucker and Bob, what you guys just both said. My wife Kim, her mom passed away in 2006. It seems like in the same way that I'm curious about, like, what would Carl Sagan, like, I'm more curious, I'm more deeply curious about, what I've said before. Kim and I have talked about this, is like, if there's parallel universes or whatever, if that's a real thing, I would love to be able to like peer in to the reality where her mom didn't die and just see how it's very easy to think like many, many, many things would be different. Like many, many, many things. It's very like scary and also interesting. And so I think if it probably would be my mother-in-law. Her name was Joanne. It probably would be her. Um, and then the setting, like I don't even know, man. Like I was really trying to think. Like I think it would be something unexpected. Just trying to think about what it would be almost seems like it would like void what would actually be. Like maybe it would be the house that Kim grew up in, or when we first met. Maybe it would be that. Maybe it would be someplace in like Texas where she actually, grew up before she moved to Colorado. Maybe it would be Cripple Creek. That was a big thing with Kim's parents. We were just talking about Cripple Creek, this little or old mining town, gambling town now in the mountains outside Colorado Springs here. Yeah, it's I don't really know what the scene would be, but and then it's like, well, what would be the in the book, the aliens are kind of explaining alien stuff. So is that what I'm thinking? Like it would be Kim's mom as like, the avatar explaining all this alien stuff? Or
Can I ask you guys, do you recall in the difference between the movie and the book, in that the book obviously had multiple astronauts or passengers, and each of them had their own subjective experience, and all of them but one guy, I think it was a family member. Do you recall that? One guy,
Yep.
wasn't a family member. It was like
It was the emperor.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was like a historical figure in his culture. So
Yeah.
and I think they had even mentioned like he didn't have a family or something like that. So I think it's almost invariably going to be someone very, very, very close to you, right? I mean, that's obviously the way it would work.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I was like, Bob's answer, Stacy. I mean, my wife. Sorry, I went for the joke again. But anyway,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense the way you said it though. Like, because even last night, I had a moment, I was looking into Kim's eyes and I just started crying. And it was partly I told her, I was like, I just am able to, it's like my brain turns off and I'm just speaking and the words are just coming out. And it was like really powerful. And I just started crying. And then the music from Dune popped into my head and I started crying more. But so I like the way you said that, Bob, about like Stacy's kind of your person, that you've already kind of had all these like really deep kind of conversations about life, the universe, everything. And it would be hard for someone else to seem like authentic in the moment.
I just don't think I would have as much intellectual context with any other human being. That's the thing, is like trying to get to the concept of how do you trust this representative, and how does it interact with you in a way that is helpful and meaningful. I think that's a great question, by the way. We should all be asking ourselves these questions. This is really the point of the art, is to then learn the lesson of the artist and then apply it to oneself. And so I think it's a fantastic exercise, Tucker,
totally.
by the way, fantastic exercise to call upon. And to feel what that would be like, meaning to be in the presence of, say, someone who has passed away. To be in like a real presence, like it's like they're indistinguishable from your sensation of what they were really like. How overwhelming that would be. How powerful that would be on such a crazy level that you can't really even comprehend. But presumably the aliens would be advanced enough to, simulate how they smell, or very small variations of whatever, mannerisms, how they touch their hair, whatever, right? Something that no one else could replicate. There, you cannot make a counterfeit. It's so good. It deceives you. Yet that it's obviously not there. She knew it wasn't her real dad, obviously, meaning she knew it was the alien representing as her dad. Anyway, I just think it's a fascinating plot device as well.
Yeah. To dive into a piece of the movie based on that, I did think it was interesting how one of the first things the alien says, as her dad, but one of the first things he says to Ellie is, "You have your mother's hands." And if he's only scanning Ellie's brain, like in the movie, Ellie's mom dies in childbirth. So how would Ellie have any idea what her mom's hands were like unless it's all genetic kind of memory type of like,
Ooh, that's a good catch.
yeah. So I thought that was like an interesting choice because on the
I would
surface
go
it seems like maybe like plot hole or like they didn't think about it, but then the more I think about it,
go
I'm
back
like
to the
probably
go
was
back to
intentional.
go back to the super high IQ play. The super high IQ play is you embody the subjective experience of what her dad is so well that you can understand that her hands are not like your hands, therefore they must be like her mother's. Like it'd be
That's
so simple.
another, yeah, that's another way to look at it like that.
Yeah, it's this very simple conclusion if you really are the dad. You see what I'm saying? Like, but for the first time seeing her hands, it's such a spooky way to look at it.
Yeah.
That is literally the guy. I mean, the aliens are so smart that they can, you know, feel what it feels like from the dad's point of view in that moment, but
Yeah.
still layered as if, this is the first time they've ever held her hands. Very
Right.
cool stuff.
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Or
So
did the alien somehow, in scanning her DNA, were able to extract the dad's DNA from hers enough that they could actually recreate that person, you know?
True.
I don't know. That's the sci-fi aspect.
yeah. Yeah, which, they don't really, the movie, like I said, if it's like a throwaway line, even, if you, they don't
Well,
really delve into that.
what's interesting though, really interesting, back into the book, is that her dad in the book, spoiler alert, her dad is not her biological father.
Right.
And so everything I just said about the dad saying, from the dad's point of view, like they're not my hands, so they must be her mother's hands. That is literally the composition of Ellie's memory.
That's true. It would have to be.
Yeah. Right.
So the dad literally wouldn't know, meaning the alien wouldn't know that those were not potentially his hands or whatever. I mean, unless, I don't know, but it's very convoluted in that, but it's very, very
Yeah.
twisted up. I mean, we got to go there eventually. So I'll let John, you're driving. So, but at some
Well,
point we got
yeah.
to talk about this whole twist at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think maybe that's is crossing things because I don't think that line is in the book about you have your mother's hands. But speaking of the book, Bob, you found a really good review. It's called The Dream of the Numinous by Mark Kelly. Really good book review. And I'm going to put that in the show notes. I'd encourage anybody listening to read that. It was a really good review of the book. And it was like a nice reminder, like, I like you said, I've kind of been driving this. I really have catered towards the movie. Big surprise. I love movies. Like, but it was nice to read that review because it's definitely, there's only like one or two paragraphs about the movie. There's some good comparisons throughout where he's like, in the movie it's this, but in the book it's this, but it's definitely more book focused. So, if you've enjoyed listening to us talk about this at all, but maybe felt like, especially if you've read the book and you felt like you're missing kind of other specific commentary on the book, I'd highly recommend that. The review is really good. So yeah, anyway, like I can't quite remember and I don't think I wrote it down, like the actual, that first moment with the alien in the book, but I did pull out some quotes like in that conversation that I was going to read here. Let's see. Uh, the dad says, "I know you think nobody has anything to learn from you because you're technologically so backward, but there are other merits to a civilization." And then Ellie says, "What merits?" And the dad says, "Oh, music, loving kindness." And it's in parentheses. He says, "I like that word. Dreams says humans are very good at dreaming, although you'd never know it from your television. There are cultures all over the galaxy that trade dreams. I may have read this in a previous episode, but well, what a great, what a great line. This idea that there's cultures all over the galaxy that trade dreams, and like that dreaming is like one of, the human species is like greatest merits. And then he specifically says, although you never know it from your television. Again, I would love to talk to Carl Sagan. I'm afraid like we already had this conversation a few episodes ago, but hey, we're gonna have it again. but but I'm so enamored with how good storytelling is anymore. And maybe in the 80s when Carl Sagan was writing this, maybe he could see it's not quite there. It's like our dreams are maybe better than television will ever be. But I mean, the climax scene of Mission Impossible 7, it's so ridiculous. It's so like absurd, but it looks like it's really happening. What my point is, like, I think the gap between the power of humans' capability to dream and being able to put that like on screen, that gap has narrowed so much since Carl Sagan passed away. I would love to know, like, if he's like, oh yeah, this is actually way cooler than I thought it would be, or whatever. I'm very fascinated by that.
Let me take the Carl Sagan side of the coin and devil's advocate this thing and say, what if individual dreams have gotten bigger and better, and individual dreams packaged for mass consumption have gotten better and better, but perhaps the individual's dreaming, the ability to create and not just consume another's dream, is what Carl Sagan is talking about. So imagine the population being overwhelmed by the bright light of a couple super geniuses' dreams. Now, good, nothing wrong with that. But what if it's in competition with your dream and you're just a little old, country bumpkin, So maybe you got to be careful about overwhelming the consumer of dreams with something that is so compelling and so over the top compared to what their self-generative dreams are, that they abandon all hope of being dreamers themselves. And so losing their humanity and becoming straight consumers, and their objective function now is one of sedentary consumption and etc. It's not a very good place to be. I don't think I would want to be there. I hope nobody else does either. But that would be the counterpoint, is that mass consumption of mass produced content, dreams, could be overwhelmingly dangerous for the human condition.
Yeah, I'm having deja vu. I think we did have this conversation, but again, I'm not mad about revisiting it. Yeah,
no, it's a very, very. I mean, obviously, this is a multi-layer creation. That's why it's so beautiful that Sagan did. But one of the layers, I think, is this tension between technology as a good, meaning something that enhances our life and our longevity and our well-being, and then the downstream effects of having solutions that you didn't have to create, having an easy way of things, which if you're a healthy minded person might not be for the best for you.
Yeah, it's very intriguing to think about where, because for me, there's no objective path, right? Like everyone's on their own subjective path in there. And, so person A, might be kind of what you're talking about, Bob, where they've totally abandoned their ability to dream, to be imaginative, because they've just given up all of that to the consuming of other people's dreams. Whereas, but I wouldn't use that as like, so that's one story, right? Like that's maybe a stereotype, but the problem with stereotypes is that they make one story the only story. There's a really good quote about that. I didn't do a good job saying what the quote is, but the idea there. I think about, well, what are the other stories? And I think I'm more of like person B, where, and I think this actually ties into what you said before we started recording, but the gratitude, that just makes me overwhelmingly cry over something. I think when it's usually music. That's the last straw, the tipping point. Visually, something can be just amazing, but in general, if there's like a music accompanying it, that's just, I lose control and I can't like speak. All I can do is cry. And you kind of, Bobby, described as like, maybe it's like this gratitude, this sense of gratitude of like being kind of present in the moment with the signal, the way it's like happening in my brain. So because I feel like I experience it that way, like if anything, I feel like that's just encouraging me to continue dreaming, to have my own dreams. It's like, it's so inspirational. Like I don't feel like I can relate very much with the other story, the person A story of like, I just gave up dreaming because it's so good. Like, I believe that exists. I just don't think that's it's harder for me to relate to that because my story, my experience is that I'm just so inspired and overwhelmed by the beauty of consuming other people's dreams. I think it
Well,
helps me.
let's be honest. Sagan, I mean, he used TV. It's not like he didn't use the medium. It's not like he doesn't understand the power of the visual medium.
Hmm.
He embraced it. It's the concept, I think, of this mass consumption, meaning we have to look at a population level, what the impacts are, and not necessarily individualized levels. No offense, John, you might not be a typical case.
I'm
What if
pretty sure I'm not. Like in my,
so
just in
so
like
I'm
my
just
life and my peer group, like I'm usually like, none of my other friends. Well, you're a spreadsheet guy, Bob, but like, I mean, I have spreadsheets tracking like when I saw movies and like the state of mind I was in. Like I'm much more of a data guy.
I'm
You
totally
know.
I'm totally not a normal person either, okay, I'm not a normal person by leaps and bounds. I'm nowhere near normal, nowhere near the average, but I can understand the appeal of reaching 70% of the market with a single message, and how
Mm.
that's going to then take half of that, so 35% will uptake that message, and then 20% will live that message. So it's going to be a significant thing, and I think that's what Sagan's speaking to, is
Yeah.
the significance of mass communication, both for good and for ill.
Yeah. As as only Carl Sagan could do. Sometimes the way he writes, it's like, yeah, that exactly. Like spot on, dude.
It's not going to be a clear answer. He's not trying
Yeah.
to say it's one or the other. I think that's
Yeah.
the tension is always that it's uncertain. This goes back to faith, right? This goes back to the argument that you don't have firsthand experience of hardly anything. Right? How many of us have really measured any of the things that we take for granted are true facts? Hardly
Yeah.
anything. Hardly anything. And this Cartesian problem is nobody has firsthand knowledge.
Right.
Yet we build our assumptions that someone else did it right. Like, why would they do it wrong? And we all agree that these
Hmm.
people did it right, and they check their work, and they're better than I am. So I'm going to take that for granted that that's true. Well, how many people really have firsthand knowledge? Very, very few. And
Yeah.
I don't think anybody who has firsthand knowledge has significant enough firsthand knowledge to compete with anybody who uses what I would call culture, which would be the shared knowledge of generations before you. Like, nobody competes with that. So anyway, back to the tension of using mass media to play upon this very human nature-esque component of what it is to be a person, which is listening to the stories and understanding the narrative, and then flowing in that direction unconsciously. So very powerful is the point.
Totally.
Very
Yeah.
powerful to influence the group as a whole, even if you're only at the end of the day reaching 20%. But that 20% might adopt that completely, and that 20% might be enough of a core to get everything else going. So It's just one of those hard to conceptualize, a message reaching hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah.
And what kind of influence that can create.
This kind of ties in. That kind of ties in with another quote I pulled out of that same scene from the book. The alien, the dad says, I think it's amazing that you've done as well as you have. You've got hardly any theory of social organization, astonishingly backward economic systems, no grasp of the machinery of historical prediction, and very little knowledge about yourselves. Considering how fast your world is changing, it's amazing you haven't blown yourselves to bits by now. That's why we don't want to write you off just yet. You humans have a certain talent for adaptability, at least in the short term. But that was like really interesting kind of concept there. Another line in that same scene: in the long run, the aggressive civilizations destroy themselves almost always. So he kind of lays out all this like doom and gloom, kind of like you're really not that great, but you have us as a species, you have a certain talent for adaptability. Well, evolution, right? I mean, that's very again, deep contemplations.
I think he got on his soapbox in those quotes right there. He definitely got up and because the whole time he's trying to play this back and forth and devil's advocate all positions here and do a great masterful job of playing out the complexities. You have to assume that the intellectual counterpart is not an idiot. You gotta kind of like figure out where are they coming from. This is very intellectually honest, right? Where are these people coming from? If you're on the science camp, let's just say de facto you're on the science camp, where's the faith camp coming from? And so I thought he did a really good, no pun intended, good faith effort here to play that devil's advocate and really get into it. And that's what makes it interesting. So to then have these moments of speechification through the alien's mouthpiece, I thought was his moment to give his own opinion, and he did, and he does. How ridiculous it is.
Yeah. Well said, man.
Going back to the whole, I'm surprised you guys haven't destroyed yourselves yet. I watched it was a little Netflix show called Connected, and they've got different episodes on different topics, but one of them was on nuclear weapons, and it was kind of a sobering statistic, but during the Cold War, the 50 years that we'll just call a Cold War, somebody tested a nuclear weapon on average every 9 days for 50 years.
Holy crap. I didn't know that.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And part of the cool thing about this show is they talked about our use of and testing of nuclear weapons actually led to them being able to detect counterfeit art. And the way they were able to do that is all these nuclear tests created carbon-14 in the explosions, which is a slightly radioactive isotope of carbon that they know the half-life for. So they get a piece of art and they go to test it to see if it's legit. Well, they can test the canvas it's painted on. And for that window of time, since the first nuclear test, they can detect the carbon-14. And if there's carbon-14 in that canvas, it's not an original because it was created, in the modern time. And they can like literally date canvases to like a 3 or 4 year period just on the carbon-14 contained within it, which I found interesting. But it's also, we're like at the end of that window because of the half-life of carbon-14 and the ban on nuclear testing. That's going away, and we're going to go back to not being able to use that method.
So do I understand this right? That like the carbon-14 just out kind of in the atmosphere kind of somehow made its way into
because it's everywhere. It comes, it covers all the crops. I mean, you can actually, it's in your cells. They can detect it globally in basically everything. But yeah, it's absorbed
Wow.
by the crops, it's eaten by the animals, it's in the trees that make the pulp for the canvas or whatever, it's just everywhere. We coated our entire planet with this
Because it
element.
because
It
it didn't
it does
occur
it didn't occur
naturally.
naturally.
Yeah. Wow. That is fascinating.
Unintended consequences. Unintended consequences. Let's go back because I really think we're pointing at the right thing here, though. Back to the nuclear weapons and the arms race, in what Sagan's point was. He really, a couple different ways, especially in the book, they took it out obviously in the movie, more for mass consumption, but in the book he got his point across, I thought, very vividly, in the insanity of having these, capabilities of destroying one another, and the whole strategy is based off of mutually assured destruction. And that's just an insane place to be for so-called intelligent creatures. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
and I want to throw this out there. I think we might have touched on it a long time ago, when we first started talking about the concept of, why do we talk? And it's, this movie is very strong, and book, very strong reason of why we talk is to make our own art, right? Out of these thoughts. But back to the nuclear weapons, I think I've mentioned before, it seems like the strategy, the game theory of the nuclear weapons is not, and this is modern times, is not to have an ability to defeat one's enemy or to prevent your enemy from defeating you. It's really having a way to trigger like a doomsday device against your own people. So the real threat is never against one's enemy. Meaning that's insane. There's no solution there. It would never work. It doesn't make any sense. It's foolish to even propose. It's like killing yourself for fear of death, But having this threat of being able to instigate this thing is sort of the ultimate level of control at the population level of modern first world societies. So how do we have so many people controlled by so few? And I think one of these is this like implied threat of mutually assured destruction. But it's not the thing is, the wink and the nod is not that I'm going to destroy you. I would never do that. You're free to do whatever you want to do. It's a free country. But if I launch on Russia, they're going to kill you all. Sorry, And so this strategy level of governance has never before been available to any government system in history. It's a new invention. So back to Sagan. What are we doing with this power? We're not actively governing this power. We're not actively using this power. We're not actively constraining this power. We're allowing certain groups of people, those who seek power, to have the biggest lever of power ever created by humans or any creature on this planet. And so he was shining, in my opinion, a bright light on that circumstance and saying, this is where we need to look. This is what is happening right now. We're all pretending, duck and cover is a reasonable solution. Back to like the propaganda of the 50s and the deep Cold War of, people, we're going to take care of you. We have ways. That wasn't anything about taking care of you. That was programming. That was propaganda. That was the truth is that the desk and the table are going to do nothing for you with a hydrogen bomb. Drop and detonate at 20,000 feet and just everything is vapor. And they know that, meaning that the powers that be, the signal makers, the ones who are putting out that message, they know that good and well. Go back to Fight Club. It's like the brochure in the plane with smiling people putting on the masks, the O2 masks. As they're going
right.
down.
Yeah.
Just take some deep breaths. Everything will be all right. Don't worry about it. Boom, at the end. And this is how human nature allows for mass governance. And so once again, this is going back to the Sagan concept. I think we gotta understand what's going on here. We got to understand. Otherwise, you're powerless to do anything about it. And he does what all great scientists have done, meaning revolutionary scientists like Galileo, is you hide it in a novel. You know,
Yeah.
you make it about a story and you tuck
Well,
it
and
away.
it's yeah, and I would say I mean that was a common theme. He talked about that. Carl Sagan talked about that in Billions and Billions and Demon Haunted World. I'm sure Demon Haunt. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure in both those, he went on quite a bit about the mutually assured destruction thing and just kind of I like the way you phrased it and maybe especially if you said like hide it in a novel or whatever, like in the art, like
Well,
it's
that's
very
Shakespeare, man. The
yeah,
play's the thing to
the
get to
play's
the
the
conscience
thing,
of the
yeah,
king, right? So,
right.
100%.
Wow.
The
Totally.
whole nuke thing to me has always been interesting, but that's one of those, like, and it's because we live where we do. Like, I don't worry about it because I'm not going to be one of the ones who has to survive in the aftermath. Like,
Hmm.
there was an article that came out just this week, and it was the top 14 targets that Putin would nuke if that came to be. And we're not number one, but 50th Space Wing at Peterson Air Force Base was on that list. And it's like, yeah, we're surrounded by NORAD,
Yeah.
Schriever, Peterson, Fort Carson, and the Air Force Academy. It's not going to be a struggle for me, man. I'm just not going. It's going to get real bright, and then I just won't be here. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's. And I when that article came out, I actually brought up that nuke map site, which is a crazy terrifying tool. Like,
I didn't know
because
this existed. I'm kind of curious now.
oh yeah,
Nuke
so
map.
yes, nuke map, and it uses Google
Nightmare
Maps,
fuel.
and
Yeah.
you can select different nuclear weapons that have different payloads, from different countries, and drop it at any point on that map, and it'll show you the fireball, it'll show you the blast wave, it'll show you the thermal range, and dude, it's terrifying because like you can put, I dropped one on Peterson and use like basically what the Russians have loaded on all their ICBMs. And like, I'm not sure if that one would kill me outright. I think it was pretty close. Like the thermal blast range was like within probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 blocks from my house. So I mean, it would not be a good time. I doubt we'd survive that. But then you take like the Tsar bomb, the largest nuke ever detonated, and you drop that on the same place, and you have effects that go almost to Wyoming. Like it's insane to even
Wow.
think about. Like the thermal flash range for that extends to South Denver. That's 60 miles, dude. That's like
It is
it's
kind of
hard to
just
even imagine.
yeah.
And like
Oh my God,
it
that's
even
crazy.
gives you like estimated casualties, estimated killed, and the difference between that standard ICBM nuke and like the SAR bomber, it was just mind-boggling. You go from like, it was something like 50,000 killed and 400,000 wounded to like millions killed and several millions injured. And it's like there's no coming back from that. Like if that ever was to happen, it's like it is game over. But what are we doing with this shit? Like why as
Yeah.
taxpayers did we allow our governments to build these things and
To,
continue
to
to build them, to build thousands of them?
Yeah.
honestly, it was to test them. Go back to we lit off a nuke every 9 days or whatever. Just think about the consumption rate. How many had to be produced to make those tests?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is the test is demonstrable from your opponent on a game theory, level. You're not testing in secret. Go back to what was that movie? Dr. Strangelove.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
The twist in Doctor Strangelove is that the Russians made the doomsday device and didn't tell the Americans, which makes no sense. Right. It was like there's some triggering thing. If they drop on us, we have this doomsday device that will drop and destroy everybody. And they're like, oh, that's great. That's great. But did we tell them? No, we didn't tell anybody. It's a secret. It's like the insanity of that, right? The insanity of having these things. So they would build them to test and send signals that we have these things that will destroy you, and you have those things that will destroy us. So now we're in this stalemate, and that pretty much fixes the geopolitical lines for like 50 years, right? Nobody moves for like 50 years. But
Yeah,
they're
it
still
makes me.
there. So
Yeah.
the lines are gone now. So the big idea of like we have somebody who's about ready to launch on us and we should be ready to launch on them. I think we're past that point. I mean, I've yet to meet a reasonable human being in my lifetime that has ever said that they have any real probabilistic expectation of a nuclear war being launched on this country. I just don't think anybody thinks it's a reasonable solution for any problem.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's encouraging.
The problem is that I think with the U.S. at least, there's enough layers. That's something that us launching an attack is pretty close to zero. I think it is, in the case of the U.S., it is a mutually assured destruction, but there is no desire to actually use them.
Yeah.
But then you have people like Putin, who the dude scares the hell out of me because do I think he would do it? Not in most cases, but I think he's much more likely than
Than like
any of the
most people.
Western world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me tell this story real quick because this is a beautiful story. This speaking of beautiful things making one cry. I cried when I heard this story the first time, and I want to say it was on a Lex Friedman podcast, and I can't recall the gentleman who was talking, but I think he was like an AI guy or something. I can't remember. Anyway, he was talking about one of the most important people in all history, and apparently during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the U.S. had detected some submarines that were, off Cuba, and obviously Cuba is so close to America, that's no bueno, and they were dropping depth charges, and they were cut off, meaning the sub was cut off, and the sub, unbeknownst to everybody, had nukes, like nukes on board, like they could fire ballistic missiles, hit the East Coast, and that was their mission, to be ready to do this thing. And they were this is real now. They had three guys, so three captains, so to speak, all had to agree to launch. And their orders were, when you get cut off and if you're under attack, presume the war has started, launch your missiles. Two of the guys agreed to launch. The one guy who didn't agree to launch, obviously, he thought first of his family dying in flames. And he said, there's no way I can do this thing. There's got to be another way. And he thought, what are they doing? The Americans, what are they doing to us? Are they trying to make all of us have our families die in fire? He's like, no, I cannot believe they're doing this thing. Amongst all the panic, all the distress, the guy realizes that they're alternating the sides that they're bombing us on with these depth charges. And he tells the other guys, look, they're not here to kill us. This is not a war. They're just trying to force us up. We don't have to do this thing. And I'll show you. The next bomb that hits is going to be on the port side. Boom. Next bomb that hits is starboard. Boom. And he talked these guys down. So the point is, this one guy is such a powerful human. Nobody knows, hardly anybody knows of this guy's existence. But he stopped what we just talked about, which was the flame death of all civilization, essentially, almost instantly, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And then the whole, the downstream effect of nuclear winter, if you're unlucky, was all diverted by one person who just couldn't accept. So I'm going to go back to the concept of, I don't see any regardless of what Putin does, this is my point. I don't see the person who's got their finger above the button pushing that button unless they're a madman. They have to be an absolute madman. I don't care what Putin says.
There was actually there was a second story with a Russian commander too, and they had some satellite-based system that was used to detect launches. It would pick up the flashes of a launch, and system alarms go off that multiple launches from the U.S. like they're getting ready to retaliate, and the guy pulls the plug and says, "No, let's wait. I don't think this is actually real." And I think what it ended up being was like sunlight reflecting off of like ice particles and clouds. It was something weird like that, but it created these flashes that set off their satellite system. But I mean, it really was like there's been several times during the Cold War where like, but for one man, we're all gone.
Totally.
That's insane. It's insanity.
So Sagan's point is, if you, I mean, in my opinion, if you are balanced on the precipice of this edge on all sides, over the long arc of all aliens, like all aliens we've ever observed, that's a terrible place to be, because someday, somehow, one of these people is not going to be able to not pull the trigger or whatever, and that's doom for everybody. So that was the point of the thing, I think, is how silly we are, how stupid we are to allow us to be governed by a strategy built on destroying everything. Must be dissembled, must be destroyed. Meaning the system of supporting that thing has to be identified and removed to alter the game theory, because I don't believe it's a defense weapon. I believe it's a mechanism of control. Yeah. That's the only reason to have these systems in place and to spend the billions upon billions of dollars and to have the implied threat. There's no realistic representation of reality that solves itself through pushing the button. None. No human's ever going to do this. Like, that's the bad guy. That would be an evil villain. That would be Lex Luthor. It's just bananas. So what's the pretext? The pretext is we're controlling everybody by having, meaning the Putins of the world, by having the say to create this retaliation event, because none of the weapons are pointed at the other guy. At themselves. They're always pointed at the other guy. So as a mechanism of control of your own population, you have to do it through the implication of, I'm pointing this weapon at the other guy, but he's not going to fire it at me individually. He's going to fire it at everybody. So now we're all on these apps looking at how close our house is to the local Air Force base.
It's
and
crazy.
Then you got to go vote. So go vote.
Yeah.
The other crazy part from that show I was watching is the guy was talking about, at least I think it was with the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, the amount of uranium that was actually fully created, or not created,
refined.
No, that was converted. That's the word I was looking for. Converted into energy was the size of a grain of rice. So that much matter, the size of a grain of rice, converted into pure energy by that explosion, is enough to kill a couple 100,000 people. It's insane.
It is insane.
You guys remember, let's do one more piece of art here, and art imitating life and vice versa. War Games with Matthew Broderick.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
One of the scenes that always got me was where he and Matthew Broderick and his girlfriend or whatever at the time, they were playing a game, they thought, obviously. Yeah. And they were like, let's nuke Seattle. And he's like, my grandmother lives there. My grandmother lived in Seattle. It stuck with me forever that they were playing this game and just pick a city or whatever. And obviously the end of the movie very much influenced me. The strategy is to not play the game, obviously. So once you get to the point of there are no winners to this game, obviously, then why are we playing it? Well,
Yeah.
to me, it's because we're being controlled by this obvious thing that everybody else is unwilling to say. The emperor has no clothes.
Mm. Wow.
So
So
Sagan has to embed it. Sorry, Tucker.
No.
Sagan has to embed it into a story then to get it through. That's the point.
Mm. Wow.
So also talking about nukes, I saw a Reddit post a week or so ago. I think it was the week before last, but it was like, give me the darkest, bleakest movies you guys have seen. And so I read through, and it's like I'd probably watched most of them, but there was one from the 80s called Threads that I had never heard of. And it's probably because it was a British movie. Now, we kind of had our own analog of that movie called The Day After. And
The day after tomorrow or the day after?
yeah, I always get the two confused because The Day After is the weather one, right? Where the climate goes all
that's the day after
shitty and
tomorrow. Yeah.
okay, so it's The Day After the nuke one. And it's
Okay.
about a nuclear exchange with Russia from an American perspective. And it's dark. Like I remember watching it at probably much too young an age, and it's sticking with me. But holy shit, is the British one like just so much darker in a way that only the Brits are good at? Like just it's the same as like Black Mirror. Like the British episodes are just darker and grittier in a way that they know because they've been through the wars. You know, like
yeah.
we don't have that experience as Americans of having our cities blown up and having to rebuild them multiple times over the last several hundred years. We just don't have that. The Brits do. And oh my God, that's a bleak film right there. I'm not saying you should watch it. I'm just saying
I'll
it's out
keep it
there.
in my back pocket for
Yeah.
one of those times when, like, for whatever reason, I'm like, yeah, I'm in the mood for it. Let me just do this. But
Yeah,
but you
it's
know,
fucking dark, dude.
wow.
Ooh.
Well, speaking of movies, like I'm not the only one that wants Christopher Nolan to direct us the story about the guy in the submarine, the third guy. Like that needs to be a movie.
Yes, totally.
Anyway,
I
yeah.
when you said the guy in the submarine, my mind immediately went to the Titanic sub that blew up, and I was like, that's not going to be a very good movie.
Yeah. Oh man. So yeah, some cheerful discussions about nuclear weapons. That's fun. I want to move on
It's
to
part of our story. The darkness
true.
makes the light brighter, you know?
Yeah, true. Yep. One other piece that I wanted to read from a quote from the book, and I got this from that review. So thank you, Mark Kelly. Because we talked about this too. It's kind of going back to Pi. So, Ellie is like, I want to know about your myths, your religions. And the alien says, I'll give you a flavor of our numinous, which is a great sentence. Well done, Carl Sagan. I'll give you a flavor of our numinous. It concerns pi, the ration of the circumference. I think it's maybe a typo, ratio of circumference of a circle to its diameter. You know it well, of course. And you also know that you can never come to the end of pi. None of you seem to know, let's say, the 10 billionth place. Something happens. The randomly varying digits disappear, and for an unbelievable long time, there's nothing but ones and zeros. And I know we talked about that briefly, but I was really happy to read that he pulled that quote out in that review because I didn't for whatever reason. But I know at the end of the book, it kind of comes back around. Doesn't Ellie writes a program? I think we were talking about this. She writes something that ends up finding that spot where it's just zeros and ones, right?
That. Yeah, I looked into that, and Stacy helped me. Hat tip to Stacy. She identified the part. There's an interesting description that under, I think it's base 11, so not base 10, base 11. If you go deep enough, it turns into a field of zeros with a giant circle. If you grid it a certain way, a giant circle of ones. So imagine so she finds it at the end. She builds a computer, and that's her lifetime work, is to find this thing. And she ends up finding it. So it's just this field of zeros and a giant one in the shape, like ones outlining the shape of a circle. That was
Yeah.
So that's pretty spooky. I mean, it's pretty clever.
I know. So cool. See,
So
it's
that was
like,
her proof. That was her proof at the end that there was a reality to the thing. And
yeah.
but they didn't get there in the movie exactly. And I do think there is some representative truth to pi being a key, so to speak. But key, I don't think the process ever creates this pattern or whatever. I think it's fascinating to think about it, but the concept of the process itself showing us something, like what if the process itself of creating the balancing act that is this irrational number of pi, what if that process does show us something? Okay, what if that process shows us through its own process how the universe could be? Speaking of, let's just say, a spirograph. Sure, if you guys are familiar with spirograph.
Yeah.
So spirograph is a toy, actually. We used it as kids. It's like a circle with gear teeth on the outside, and you could place one within another and kind of put a pencil on there and draw patterns where the one circle is rotating interior to the other circle. Anyway, it's just a device of representing patterns generated with circles within circles. So it just so happens to be, it's just a very beautiful concept, I think. But the point is that the art is indicative of some sort of realization that there is a underlying understanding within the mathematics itself to the universe and to not spirituality maybe, but to the human condition, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Much more cheerful to talk about than mutually assured destruction, by the way.
Totally. Sweet and sour, he knows how to
Sweet
do
and
it.
sour. Yeah. Kind of along the same line, sort of in the movie, there's a line that I really loved towards the end of the conversation before he kind of sends her on her way. They were talking about, like, I think maybe she says, like, how alone or empty and just how it feels because the universe is so massive. I think it was something in that context, and the alien says, in all our searching, the only thing that we found that makes the emptiness bearable is each other. So I don't think that was necessarily a Sagan line. I don't think that's in the book that way, but it ties all together for me because we do need, like, each other. Like, all humans, I think, need each other. So these conversations about, like, on the brink of destroying, not even all of us, but destroying, like, huge amounts of people just seems so kind of, okay, come on, like, that's not the future for us, right? Like, we're gonna, like, recognize these things kind of the way you guys were describing, and like the war games, like, the solution is not to play the game, right? And, like, dismantle these things, and it's a weird thing, but I'm team human, when it comes to that kind of stuff. And, like, we do need each other, like, all of us. We're just going to be much better off, for the survival of our species, for the evolution, generations and generations, hundreds of generations down the road, when we evolve, like, new senses and things, we become, like, post-human or whatever.
Well, go back to the beginning concept of the genius of the book, in that it's a worldwide uniting idea, but not based on threat.
Yeah.
And so it's based on opportunity.
I think we do need something like that to happen to force us to, melt the swords back into plows
Okay,
instead
you said
of
that.
what we've always done is
Like
finding new ways
bigger
to
and
kill
better
each other.
swords.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of that's a good kind of segue back into and by the way, yeah, again in the movie, the small moves theme comes back. He says small moves, Ellie, because she's like, so what's the next thing? And he's like, you take the first step, and he basically says like the next one will happen when you're ready, but it's not like, he really implies like this is how it's been done for billions of years. It's not like the game changer. Like there's no expectation that she's going to come back and like everything has changed. And I think it's because there's this theme of faith. It comes back. She comes back in the movie, and it's similar in the book. There's no proof. you know, she has the camera on her head. She records stuff, but you know, it kind of works its way out in the movie. Um, that it's a sort of fun twist at the very, very, very end. But the idea is that she doesn't have proof that she actually went on this journey across the galaxy. Everybody witnessed the machine fall through the spinning rings, fall right through it, land in the ocean. It took like 17 seconds or whatever. I think it's very similar in the book, right? Basically, everyone else's experience is like nothing happened. I know there's a scene in the movie that reminded me so much of Sarah Connor in Terminator 2, where it's like Jodie Foster's kind of looks like, haggard a bit, like in this room, kind of isolated, and people are observing her, and it does kind of portray it as like she's crazy, right? Like obviously she didn't travel across the universe; she went straight through, nothing happened, right? But I think the whole point is.
Well, is truth
The
subjective
next
or
step is like,
objective? Is truth subjective or objective?
well, that's the question, isn't it? Right? Like,
Yes.
I don't think it's one or the other. It depends what kind of truth, I suppose. So, for her, it was true. It did happen. There's a really good quote here. I'm going to read the whole thing. It's in this hearing where James Woods' character is really grilling her, and he even like brings up Occam's razor. He's saying like, is it more likely that you were whisked away? These aliens told you some fundamental truths about the universe and sent you back without a single shred of proof. Or is it more likely that it was all this elaborate hoax by Haddon just to kind of, stick it to the human species one last time before he dies or whatever? And he says, why can't you just admit this was a hoax? And she says, because I can't. I had an experience. I can't prove it. I can't even explain it. But everything that I know as a human being, everything that I am, tells me that it was real. I was given something wonderful, something that changed me forever, a vision of the universe that tells us undeniably how tiny and insignificant and how rare and precious we all are, a vision that tells us that we belong to something that is greater than ourselves, that we are not, that none of us are alone. I wish I could share that. I wish that everyone, if even for one moment, could feel that awe and humility and hope. But that continues to be my wish. And I'm really proud of myself that I didn't break down crying because that was really hard. But I fucking love that. It's like one of my favoriteest things in the whole movie because I think it's a universal thing, even though it's in the context of the movie and this, journey to another place in the galaxy. I think those same words can be used for so many aspects of the human experience. And it does kind of come down to like faith and belief that like somebody has an experience that's unrelatable to, your own. Person A, person A experiences something that person B has not experienced. And this leap of faith thing that like person B doesn't need to have that experience. There is beauty and truth in the leap of faith to believe that something person A experienced is true without needing that experience themselves. It's a very like profound thing I've thought about a lot lately. And I just really think they nailed it in the scene with the dialogue and the way Jodie Foster delivers that. It's a very wide-reaching, universal truth, I think, about what it means to be a human.
Definitely.
Well, and
You
I think it ties into consciousness, and I think that's where
Mm.
things get slippery. Is, there's scientific truth, there's things that can be proven, but then you have people who take DMT and have conversations with the universe and have and meet beings of some sort while they're having these experiences, and there's nothing you can say to them that would take away their experience.
Exactly. There's something that happened. It's the thing about the experience that
Yeah.
this gap that we bridge through, things like belief and faith between like, yes, the scientific truth is important, um, kind of going back, I can't remember if I said this before we started recording, but are there things that humans aren't meant to understand ever? I don't think so. I think the endeavor is a beautiful thing, to try to find the objective truth.
go back to the feeling of the thing, because I think this is the crux of the podcast, meaning the translation of how it feels into words, the poetry of the thing. That is the hardness. The hardness is conveying how it feels one to another, but you can do it. It is possible. You can tell a story, and that story can influence the behavior of other people because it changes how they feel. It could make them feel good. It could make them feel bad. They could cry for joy. They could cry for sadness. So you could make someone angry. You could make someone have hatred. You could make someone have love and compassion. The story is the thing. So the poet is the master of the story. And it becomes the power of, we all know each other have feelings. And we all know that each other knows that we have feelings. And in this game, we're allowed to make up these things called metaphors, which aren't true. Technically, it's not scientifically true.
Yeah.
But metaphorically, we can convey the truth of the feeling. And that is the truth that we're trying to, that's the power of the message.
Yeah.
Well, and going back to the, our quest for the truth, if you look at the current kind of multi-dimensional theories of our universe, if that is scientifically true, then we can't know the truth, because anything fourth dimension and higher, as Carl so beautifully did in his little Cosmos episode, we could never even objectively see that. We could see nothing but a shadow of it.
But we can use the metaphor to understand it. That's what's so beautiful.
And I think the beauty in that whole idea is accepting that us as humans can't figure it all out. That there's always going to be a layer of mystery and awe that we can't cross the threshold of.
Yeah.
But I think the journey is the important part. Yeah, you
Right.
may never reach the end destination of the ultimate equation or unifying physics on the quantum and the macro level, but it's the journey that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. And having the, conversations and stuff, because like I think this is maybe a relevant kind of thought experiment, because if we take that further, let's take like the human experience of like chronic depression, right? And let's say that, there was some advance in scientific means of studying the brain and knowing like where feelings are coming from and being able to sort of codify feelings. Again, kind of getting to the technology that's described in Ready Player One and Ready Player Two. If there was some objective scientific truth, like we can look at what the brain is doing and we can see these are the feelings. Like I had this idea that like if somebody who had suffered from chronic depression their whole life, had their brain analyzed and had someone say, actually, no, you weren't sad this whole time. Like that sounds so absurd to me. Like I think the endeavor is worthy, and it's great to like pursue that and try to like codify feelings, try to find this objective scientific truth. And yet, even at the end of the day, like it seems so absurd that someone could be like, no, you weren't depressed this whole time. Because this data that I pulled out and this objective truth is saying it
But
must have been
depressed is a
something
label.
else.
It's a label, though. It's not the thing. Guys, have you ever seen Birdman?
Oh, it's been
Michael
decades.
Keaton, right?
Yes, Michael Keaton.
Yeah, I saw it once. Yeah.
So there's this part where he's sitting in front of his mirror, his makeup mirror or whatever to get ready for his show. And in the corner, there's this little piece of paper with these words written on. Nobody ever talks about it, never announces it, but it's in the corner for like an extended period of time as they're doing their thing. And it was the words are not the thing is the thing. I mean, you could look this up and fact check me. I don't know if anybody can, but I can't remember exactly what it said. But it was about, so the concept of, is the label the thing? Is the map the thing? Is the territory the thing? What is actually the thing, right?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, I think we can all agree the only thing that's the thing is experiencing the thing, and you can't really share that with another person.
Yeah, the label is another Irshad Manji ism. The label should be labels are important. Obviously, labels are important. It's very useful that we can say this thing is a chair and it's this is a table. But yeah, especially when it comes to like human experiences and feelings and emotions, like the label should be the starting point, not the end, not the finish line. Start with like the label, but like
art of the label is the art of the poet. So the label's the language. However you choose to describe a thing, there's a million ways to choose to describe a thing, an infinite number of ways to describe a thing. And the poetry is in, selecting that way to convey the fact and the feeling of the thing. And so it is trying to convey, back to the book, the subjective experience of meeting the aliens and going through this thing that's undeniably real to oneself, but is literally unprovable and nonsensical, let's just say, to anybody else. Whatever you came up with in your daydream or your imagination or your delusion or your DMT trip or your real experience, if it was going through a wormhole and then coming back through a wormhole, it's yours and yours alone. And the only thing that's going to convey that to anybody else is the poetry of your words.
Yeah.
So good luck.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I love it. Good luck. Yeah, truly. Yeah. It's
and so
the effort.
But then you get the art. So at the flip side is the only thing you have really, other than to watch somebody go through a grieving process or a joyful process and just watching them, is the description of it through the narrative process and having, either a real or imagined. I mean, a story could tell you a very important lesson without being literally factually true. But let's say the lesson is something that, conveys a piece of information that benefits you. I mean, there's many, right? This is, but it might be beautiful. Like you're attracted to it from its beauty, but you don't understand there's something else encoded in that is beneficial or something. I mean, this is how you get evolution, right? Is adaptations are kind of tested in the real world, and the software level of our adaptations, our culture, and our stories are a part of our culture, and our fitness is a function of our stories.
Well said, man. I love it.
So I want to bring up the Talos principle again, and I know we talked about it off the record, but there was such a beautiful like message in the second one. And throughout the story, you have these conversations where it's like trying to get through your head that, we all kind of understand that death comes for us all, right? But it's trying to kind of hammer home the point that it's not just death, but extinction is actually the norm for any species. As far as we know, nobody has survived
Forever.
you know?
Yeah, good point.
But its message is that the only way to break that cycle is love. Because you basically have to love your species and care for each other enough that you can get all your eggs out of that one basket. And you're not gonna accomplish that as a species fighting each other.
Yeah.
Like, you have to unify. You have to take that step that says, hey, I love our species enough that we need to create a program to get us off this planet. Because that's the only way to safeguard against extinction. As long as you're stuck in one place, there's been we're in the middle of the sixth mass extinction on this planet. We don't like to look at it that way, but that's kind of it's kind of the trend we're looking at.
Right. Yeah.
Anthropocene. Yeah.
And it's so gnarly too, because like those subjective experiences of humans are, again, Ellie's words, how tiny and insignificant. I mean, it's in the grand scheme. Have you ever seen those videos of people kind of talking about the history of the Earth, and kind of explaining it in like a physical sense, where someone's like, the distance between here and this tree that's 300 feet away or whatever, if I went from here to the tree and back like 1,000 times or whatever, like that kind of represents the length of time that the Earth has been around or whatever, and our the human species' piece of that is this just tiny fraction of that whole length. You know what I mean? And each person's life, average life expectancy, right, is what, around like 80 or something now. That's a tiny fraction of that. The word insignificant is like generous. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
Yeah. But that's what we have, right? So, dude, love, like such a like awesome thing to me. I don't know if we've actually talked too much about it. Here we are, like 5 episodes deep, and like that's a theme in Contact, right? Love. You could just like talk about that like so much. I do want to go back into you talking the way you said about like getting off the planet and stuff in the book. Haddon kind of does that. He puts himself in like cryo sleep. I can't remember if he actually does die. I think he kind of does sort of die, but his wishes or whatever is to be in like this cryo sleep, and he puts himself on a spaceship, and it's called the Gilgamesh of all things. Tucker, I keep forgetting to tell you, but I did finish Children of Time, the trilogy. Oh, nice. Adrian Tchaikovsky wrote a trilogy of books. The first one's Children of Time, and it's like an ark ship kind of humans leaving Earth and trying to establish other. And one of the in the first book, this ship is called the Gilgamesh. I don't know if that's a direct tie-in to Sagan. If so, what a brilliant nod of this guy Adrian Tchaikovsky to like, yeah, I'm going to call it the Gilgamesh. Maybe Haddon was on that. Anyway, that's I think that's really cool tie-in. But yeah, so they don't do that in the movie. In the movie, they just kind of show that Haddon dies on the Mir space station. So there's that. There's another line in the book that I did pull out. Just good combination of words here. I think it's in context of people not believing that Ellie actually experienced this thing. It was like some paranoid fantasy in which a patchwork of innocent facts are reassembled into an intricate conspiracy. again, prophetic in the way like Carl Sagan just so good at, you can apply that sentence to like a lot of things that we've experienced in the last several years. The narrative, these paranoid fantasy in which a patchwork of innocent facts are reassembled into an intricate conspiracy.
It's vital to understand, in my opinion, that any narrative can be created after the fact to support or go against a specific idea.
Yeah.
I mean, all the narratives are always after the fact constructed, and there's going to be almost every complex topic has two sides, at least two sides, if not 3, 4, 5 sides.
Right.
And so being able to create an after the fact, post hoc, after the fact rationale for a decision that was made is human nature. I mean, that is what is happening. That is the duality of conscious and subconscious, where we all are making up after the fact our narrative for why we chose to do a certain thing or chose not to do a certain thing. And I'm saying there's very little component of the conscious mind that's creating that idea or compelling the behavior that we must take, and then we have to make a story after the fact to narrate, with us being the hero, of course, in our own story of why we chose to do what we did. And so this is the great tension, is not only to the point of what we've been talking about, the interpersonal communications and love and emotions and signals from one to another and history, but then there's the tension internal, the internal blind spot of our own subconscious, where we can't really hit that deep place. We know it's there, it must be there, inductive reasoning, it's got to be there, but I can't really get to there. And that's the whole point of it being subconscious, is it's below or unconscious. It's below our awake sense of understanding. It cannot be accessed. It cannot be resourced. But we can then see how we behave and others, and then justify it after the fact by explaining through a narrative, a story, why this thing took place. And that is so compelling. And it's both, a blessing and a curse, in that Sagan can encode these deep philosophical messages inside a piece of art and hand it over as a metaphor. And we can also take our day-to-day activities and make choices that we don't fully understand, and then after the fact make up why we chose what we did or not, and live with ourselves. Like keep on going as the conscious rider of the automobile that's being piloted by the unconscious side.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. I love it, man.
Well, Sagan's doing the thing. I mean, this is why this is the touchstone. This is why this is the one this is the foundation level. This is the level. Grasp this concept and you can reach, another concept, which would be like nirvana, this awareness, this freedom, this enlightenment, awakening, all these
self-actualization.
Highest
you
level.
You would transcend and like pop up out of the matrix, pop up in like the little pod and realize like, oh, I was in a simulation. Now I'm like self-actualized out of there's a scene in or one of the Animatrix stories. I don't know if you guys watched the Animatrix, where there's these little stories, animated stories about the Matrix, and this guy runs himself out of the Matrix. He pushes his body. He's an athlete. He's like a sprinter, and he runs so fast, and he just pushes his body past what's the limit is, and he wakes up in the pod.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I like it though. I like it.
No, and I mean the whole societal based, black and white, pick a side type stuff. I'm going to refer back to a different, much probably less well known and respected philosopher, but the band Biohazard, hardcore band from back in the day, basically said, there is no black and white. There's only shades of gray.
Yeah.
And it's more profound than it has a right to be, coming from a hardcore band, but it's true. there is no definite on most things. There's always another side to the story that you either don't know or haven't heard or don't understand.
Yeah.
And
I love that so much. I think I've shared this maybe with both of you at some point, but I love that so much about the gray that Kim and I, a lot of times, like in some haikus, we spell gray Greay, because it's like it's just such a good way to just be like, yeah, it's not like it's only Grey or only Gray. There's two ways to spell it. Like, why don't we just embrace that and spell it in this new way, Greay? So you might see that in some of our haikus and stuff, and that's why, because it's like fully embracing the
That's like very,
grayness.
that's like a very self-referential. It reminds me of like PHP, right? Which is PHP hypertext preprocessing, right? It's its own reference. It's, what is that name? There's a word for that. Do you know what I'm talking about, John? Like a self-referential name, like PHP. You're familiar, right? PHP.
The coding language.
Yeah, but what it stands for.
I actually didn't know until just now.
So it literally is self-referential. So it stands for the first letter P of PHP stands for PHP. It's PHP hypertext preprocessing or something like that. So can one of you guys look up what is that called? There's a name for that. There's a
like
name
the
for
term
that.
when like for self-referential.
In the name itself, something like that. I apologize. I took us too far.
No, you're good. The first thing that came to mind was like meta, because that label has been thrown around a lot, aside from like Facebook calling their parent company Meta. But a lot of the criticism of like Matrix Resurrections was it's too meta or whatever. Synonyms for self-referential, avant-garde.
it's
I
kind of
don't think
like
this.
same vein as people calling them ATM machines when they have a
Yeah.
machine.
Yes. Pin numbers. Pin
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah. Right.
But,
I might have to like dig. I probably my Google foo is failing me to. I think I know what there is like some term for that. It's not portmanteau, is it? Portmanteau is, what is a portmanteau? I know I just like portmanteau is a word blending the sounds and combining the meanings of two others. That is not it at all. My bad. Anyway. Yeah. So anyway, I guess speaking of colors, the other question I had about going back to Contact in the movie, after this hearing, Ellie leaves and there's a whole swarm of supporters. I mean, I guess there's probably some protesters in there too, but a bunch of people are standing outside the building. I say it's Capitol building or something where she was like testifying, right? Anyway, there's a blue color theme. Not sure where that came from. I don't know if I missed something along the way. I didn't know, but it seemed like all the people that were supporting her had like blue signs, blue, clothes, blue things. There was a lot of blue. Did that mean anything to either of you guys?
I don't
you're
believe
right.
so.
Yeah.
For me personally.
I think you're right in that it was probably intentional. I don't have an understanding of the significance other than we might have talked about before, like the pale blue dot or something like that. That was one of those
maybe
powerful
moments. Yeah.
I can't remember if Sagan coined that term, actually. I cannot recall. It was that whatever Voyager, perhaps looking back on Earth, whichever probe is the furthest away. And essentially after amazingly short amount of time, we just disappear as being an individual thing, and we just kind of like turn into a little sparkly thing like everything else, which is quite profound.
I like it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think this is probably like a good place to wrap up. There's a few other things from the movie I wanted to bring up, but I think we can start with that in the next episode. And I will make a point to research the blue color theme. Maybe that is just a reference to the pale blue dot, or maybe it's something else. I will do my best to have that answer when we start the next one. And then what sounds like a good idea is like we'll transition during the next episode into the next kind of topic. And Tucker had found this really great YouTube video. It's the Holmberg debate. This must be a yearly thing, I guess, but 2023 Holmberg debate. It's in Sweden, and it was about consciousness. Does consciousness exist outside of our heads? And there was 3 people kind of in this really good debate. I don't even know if it was a debate. It was a really good conversation. It's like about a 2-hour long video. So
It's very healthy.
yeah, very healthy.
Proper. It's a good, healthy, constructive. I would say we've beaten it up already, but the word beautiful. It was fascinating, mind expanding.
Lots of different ideas. It wasn't all. It wasn't like an echo chamber of like everybody's agreeing.
Precisely.
Everyone was like, here's my kind of, from their own, studies and experiments. Really good. So I think we can tie that in, and that way, if it's we're over 4.5, but it'll probably be about 5.5 episodes of Contact content.
If you had a proposition bet at the beginning, how many was the end? It's going to be 5.5, probably.
Yeah, exactly 5.5, right?
So don't bet against that. I'm telling you all, do not bet against it. That is the answer.
Right. So cool. Well, fantastic conversation as usual, you guys. I do have a correction on the quote that I've been ending the last couple episodes with. Is actually John Adams that said this. It was in a letter to his son, John Quincy Adams. But yeah, from 1781. How cool is that? Like that long ago, John Adams said, "You will never be alone with a poet in your pocket."